I didn't want to come home. Our house, Kiora, 36 Gallipoli Crescent, Glen Iris, Melbourne, has been bought by a delightful multicultural ethnic minority Greek couple. At the auction, the bidding got pretty fierce, and at one stage we thought our home might be knocked down to a couple of boat people. But in the end, the multiculturals won. Not that when you've passed away, as I have, you can ever be sure who's going to live in your house. And by the same token, when you buy an established residence like this, you can never be sure if the deceased occupant has granted you vacant possession. But I didn't want to come home. It's a funny story. After I passed away, caught the ferry, jumped the twig, was gathered, had my last cup of Milo, my wife, my widow, Beryl, decided to put this place on the market so she could move up to the sun to a new condominium in Surfers Paradise. So she threw a lot of my left-off effects into a tea chest and dropped them off at the Holy Trinity Voluntary Helpers Bring and Buy thrift shop, along with my favourite armchair. I took it pretty philosophically. After all, Beryl wasn't to know I was still sitting in it. I don't know how long I was sitting in this chair in that thrift shop window either. I could have been there 6 or 7 years. But one morning, this little Greek mother-to-be, this little Papadopoulos woman, she came in, she fell in love with this chair. She had it delivered to her new home, which turned out to be my old home, Kiora, 36 Gallipoli Crescent, Glen Iris, Melbourne. It was a chance in a lifetime. Fate moves in a mysterious way, but I didn't want to come back. The house, the street, everything has changed out of all proportion since the old days before the war when young people like me and Beryl came to live here. Oh, not that we ever had anything against the occasional multicultural. Beryl always had welcome on the doormat. But that didn't mean you invited them onto the premises. I remember before the war, my wife used to get all her fruit and veggies delivered by a little Chinese chappie, a delightful little smiling Chinaman by the name of Charlie O'Hoy. He used to drive his horse and cart religiously once a week from his market garden on the Banyule estate down there at Heidelberg behind the gasometers. He'd come up the cutting, round past Ivanhoe and Alphington, where the paper mills are today, and then he'd go up by Studley Park, up that steep hill past the lunatic asylum to the T-junction at Cotham Road. Then he'd go down Glenferrie Road, down that steep hill past the Methodist Ladies' College on the left, over Barker's Road, along by the all-night chemist, over Christabel Crescent, under the railway bridge by the Hawthorne Town Hall, and then up that little rise, over the tram line at Ruisdale Road to the top of the hill. Then he'd go down the hill, down past Scotch College on the right, through Kooyong, by the tennis courts there, and then hard left all the way via Gardiner's Creek to Glen Iris. Quite a long journey for a little Chinese chappie in a horse and cart, particularly in view of the fact that sometimes Beryl's only requirement was an onion. But little did we know then that he was the thin end of the wedge, that after the war the floodgates would open. Now, of course, it's a case of come one, come all. I mean, the Stubbings' beautiful house down the road there at number 43, that's been remodelled from top to bottom by a Vietnamese couple from from Vietnam by the name of Nug. N-G, that's their name, Nug. That's how they spell it. We thought at first they might have shortened it out of consideration for their neighbours. Shortened it to Nug, that is to say, not from Nug. You couldn't very well do it. Well, I suppose you could shorten it to G or N. But we wouldn't have expected them to do that. We were happy to meet them halfway down the road. Well, as far down the road as possible. Then we thought their name might have been the first and last letters of something. Like nothing. But you could smell their cooking. You could smell it on the bowling green. Old Phyllis Prescott looked through the fence and she saw the Nugs sitting on what had been the Stubbings' beautiful patio, shelling peas. She couldn't believe her eyes. They threw the peas away. They just cooked the shells. They put them on a dustbin lid with a bit of Worcestershire sauce, and then they threw in anything that moved. So there was a lot of worry, naturally, when Miss Warner's Cocker Spaniel went missing. Luckily, it turned up in the dog pound, or those Nugs could have been in trouble. They could have been deported if they'd had passports. But the first house in our street to actually fall into foreign hands was Vi and Alan Chapman's beautiful Californian bungalow directly across the street from here at number 37. Of course, we'd known Vi and Alan for donkey's years. I mean, we were in the tennis club with them before the war and the bowling club and the crazy whist. But latterly they had become, we thought, very, very elderly. We were quite concerned, really, as to how elderly they had become. And their daughter-in-law, Beverly, had been trying to get them into a little flat for many, many years. That's the main function of a daughter-in-law, getting old people into little flats. You see, they want us all on the one level. Below ground level, if you ask me. But Vi and Alan wouldn't budge, you know. They clung on for hours, you know. They were still there, in their home, in their lounge, watching Neighbours, even long after the TV had been disconnected. They were still there when the new owner, Bruno Agostino, and his family of 11 had their tea chest in the driveway. But of course, once they'd gone, that home was swarming with Italians night and day. Talk about build. They extended themselves out of all proportion. They built on the back, they built on the front, they built on the left, they built on the right. They turned it into a blessed palace. And it would have broken Vi's heart to see what they did to her front lawn. They got a rotary hoe to that beautiful garden, and she had a magnificent front garden. A lovely little fish pond with a bit of chicken wire over it to stop the fish getting out. And round the back, too, they ploughed that up, too. They ruined that beautiful back garden. Vi Chapman had a magnificent pin oak tree there, I recall. I remember when she bought it as a seedling at a Methodist church fete before the war, and it grew into a lovely tree. It was a beautiful tree when war broke out, a magnificent tree. Well, it resisted the bulldozer for the best part of a day. And in the end, they got the block and tackle to it, and it came down with a groan. You could hear up and down the crescent. Only when they were chopping that tree up did they find a little bit of rotten wood nailed onto one of the branches. All that was left of a tree house that Neil Chapman had played in before the war. Of course, Neil was beheaded in Borneo. Some Jap with a sword said, "Neil," and he did. That was that. It's terrible to think your destiny can be in your own name. Well, we went to see Vi and Alan in the little flat their daughter-in-law had bought for them. But we kept putting it off, and by the time we got there, Alan had had a major stroke and Vi was blind. Poor old Vi was blind. But Beryl never goes anywhere empty-handed, and she'd made a lovely pineapple upside-down cake that she'd got of a recipe on a label on a golden circle pineapple tin. She got most of it off the label. There was a little bit that stuck to the tin that she never did get, but Beryl used to improvise. In the kitchen at any rate. And it was a magnificent pineapple upside-down cake, and you know, old blind Vi knew what it was just by the feel of it. She said, "You've brought me a sticky cake, Beryl." We were amazed. I mean, when you think of all the things it could have been. Then she asked Beryl a very embarrassing question. Suddenly, out of the blue, she said, "Beryl." Beryl said, "Yes." She said, "Beryl." Beryl said, "I'm over here, Vi." "Yes." She said, Oh, there you are, Beryl." She said, "Are those Italians looking after my beautiful garden?" I've never been more proud of my wife's diplomacy. She gave Vi a long look of reassurance, completely wasted as it happened. She said, "They're certainly taking care of your garden, Vi." He said, "You got nothing left to worry about there." Down the road where the Longmires, next to Stubbings, the old Longmires place. Now that house, a magnificent property, has been bought by a Chinese couple, lovely young couple too, but the first thing they did was to build the Great Wall of China up the front, that's to say about a 9-foot-high brick fence. The neighbours can't see in anymore. And old Doris Morrison, who never missed a trick, dear old Doris Morrison, who invented Neighbourhood Watch, she can't see over the fence. So, poor old dear, she's lost interest in life itself. She even began to neglect her meals on wheels. Little casseroles started to pile up on her doorstep. Just the opportunity her daughter-in-law was waiting for. She frog-marched Doris into a maximum security retirement village. Oh, it had all mod cons too, including those little buttons on the wall that the old folk could fall against in an emergency if they were lucky, and their aim was very, very good. Mind you, they had to police that a bit. I mean, if they were alive next day, they got fined. Well, that house was on the market within minutes. I mean, the ambulance, whisking Doris away, nearly collided with the cars coming to view the property. And there was that daughter-in-law showing people around the house with the oven still warm from Doris's last batch of scones. Her dripping still hadn't set in the blue-striped bowl on the windowsill, a damp Kleenex in a nightie pocket under the pillow, her crumbs in the bed, her teeth in the kitchen. But that house found a willing buyer in Dr. Farouk Ben Narasimhan, an Indian doctor, and his wife who worked out at the university. Beryl said the wife had the brains, and she used to get around the house all day in a saki, and she'd always walk about 4 paces behind her husband. Something to do with their diet. Mind you, if Beryl and I ate nothing but curry, I hope we'd come to some arrangement. Lois and Theo Gosper were very old friends of ours before the war. Unfortunately, they've passed away some time ago, and their magnificent Spanish mission-style home has been bought by a little Greek chappie by the name of Con Scorpius. He pioneered formal dress hire in our neighbourhood. He rents out old pale green and mauve ruffled shirts to young chappies who want to be married looking like snooker players. There's a shilling in that, apparently. Oh, he doesn't live in the house. He rents it out to some Australian students. Funnily enough, they are the only Australians now living in Gallipoli Crescent. The students don't do much. They hardly do anything at all. Oh, they roll their own cigarettes and they have door-slamming competitions. Being unemployed, they've all got cars, and they park their vehicles on Lois Gosper's beautiful front lawn, and I can still see little Lo weeding that lawn before the war on her hands and knees with a kitchen knife. Now it looks like old photos of the Battle of the Somme. The students, they get up in the middle of the night, they run out, slam the doors and go back to bed again. They're probably on a grant to do that. Anyway, they buy all of their clothes at the thrift shop. Funny enough, I recognised a couple of my cardigans. And there's a beatnik girl living there with green pointy hair. She wears the suit that I was married in. Anyway, this little chap, Con Scorpius, has got himself onto the local council now, and he's campaigning to change the name of this street to a Greek name, like, or something like Parthenon Road. But it would be a tragedy to lose a lovely old Australian name like Gallipoli. Dot Swift. Oh, fancy forgetting Dot Swift. She was about our favourite neighbour, and she was lovely to Beryl when we first came to live in this street before the war. Dot Swift was once a very fat woman. Beryl told me that before the war, Dot took a 42D cup. I never knew what Beryl meant by that. I assumed that she'd once borrowed something and failed to return it, but I never realised that Beryl numbered her utensils. Anyway, she was a beautiful person and a very refined woman, Dot. She came from a very comfortably off family. She'd been born in this neighbourhood, in a lovely old home, more of a mansion really than a home, up on the hill, no more than about 8 or 9 streets from here, up on the left in the old part of Glen Iris, with beautiful views over East Malvern, a magnificent property with a croquet lawn and a tennis court, a little summer house, big wide verandas, smothered with wisteria. A beautiful home called Braeside. And it was in Braeside Avenue too, which I always thought was a bit of a coincidence. One morning, Dot was in her little flat. She tripped on the lino and had a fall. She took a tumble. Funnily enough, Jocelyn, her daughter-in-law, was there at the time, having a bit of furniture valued. Well, she knew that when old people fall, you don't move them. So she had a cup of tea and a cigarette, and then she couldn't stand the moaning and groaning in the other room any longer. So next morning she looked up the yellow pages under twilight to see if she could find a nice facility for the old lady, and she did. She found a private nursing home, only about 7, 8, 9 streets from here, up the hill in the old part of Glen Iris, a private nursing home called Montcalm, which had been Braeside, Dot's childhood home, though Jossie, the daughter-in-law, I don't think ever knew that. So Dot's on the doorstep of Montcalm. Naturally, she doesn't recognise those big, wide mosaic verandas where she played as a child, because they're teeming with wheelchairs now. And how would she know the big front room where she learnt the piano as a kiddie? because now it's full of little old ladies with tubes up their noses, all enjoying blind date. But by one of the coincidences that only seems to happen in real life, they allocate Dot a room right at the back, right there at the back of the house, a room that had once been her own nursery. But she doesn't recognize that either, because rooms get smaller as you get older. And this one really has, because they've lowered the ceiling and squeezed 7 beds into it. And besides, she hasn't seen it for 67, 68 years. But on the 3rd morning, when she comes out of the sedation, she gets a pretty young nurse to help her to the window. Costs her money, but she does. And when she looks out of that window, for the first time in 67, 68 years, nearly 70 years, she can't believe her eyes. Because there, still standing, is the old peppercorn tree where her dad once fixed up a swing. It's standing in the doctor's car park now, pretty well battered to death by BMWs. But the next morning, the morning nurse who comes from Sri Lanka, a nice lass who likes a Maxwell house and a king-size mentholated St. Moritz with a physio at 11, they have a good laugh at Dot's expense. She says, you know that new one, that Mrs. Swift in 21? She says, that's a character for you. She says, what a character? She says, you know what that old lady does all day long? She just stands in the window, staring at the car park, saying, where's my swing? Where's my swing? She thinks she's a budgie. Thinks she's a budgie. I'm glad I never had a fall. You only have to trip these days for your daughter-in-law to be into the yellow pages. The world is full of elderly citizens lying on the carpet, looking up at their daughter-in-laws, saying, I didn't fall. I didn't fall. I like it down here. Just dusting the skirting board. But I won't outstay my welcome here. I didn't want to come back. Never go back. Never go back. I'll wait. I'll wait until their little one arrives. Funny that Greek couple turning this particular room into a nursery. Yes, it's a bit of a coincidence because Beryl and I used to call this, we called this the nursery for a bit. Still, I'm glad there'll be a kiddie in Kiora at last. And I'm glad Beryl didn't throw away all my bits and pieces. She used to call me a hoarder. She'd say, you're a hoarder. She always had a gift for words, my wife. She'd also say, you can't take it with you. She certainly didn't. She hardly took anything with her. She even forgot our wedding photo. Fancy forgetting that. Still, this will be interesting to the little new arrival. Give him an idea what a married couple looked like. There's a dickens of a lot of my memorabilia still left here. Look, there's the pianola rolls we bought once when we thought we might be getting a pianola. And the biscuit barrel I won at Housey at Erskine House Lawn in 1938. That's my Bowles trophy. My Bowles trophy. Oh, Val de Clissold wanted this as a souvenir of me. Beryl said she could easily have it. She could take it down the road and get my name buffed off it, but Valda never come back for it. Still, there it is, in pride of place. They love a bit of history on their doorstep, the Greeks. What's in this old Duresque cigarette tin? Oh, it's nothing. It's just a lock of my mother's hair. I thought we'd lost that years ago. Still here. Cherished by those ethnic minorities. So it's good for children to grow up in a house with a few old-fashioned things scattered about. We had them when we were young. They'd say, oh, don't touch that, it belongs to Nana. Don't touch that. That is Nana. I remember she had the pictorial atlas. I once looked up the word Aborigine. It said original inhabitant. I suppose that'd make Beryl and me a couple of abos. So this is my dream time. This is my ancient tribal site. Well, if that's how they treat a man's memorabilia, don't give 'em back the Elgin marbles.